So thank you everybody for attending this morning, and to Corkbig for the invitation to have a chat with my friends that I made, Leonie and Fiona and Hannah at the Entrepreneur Experience there recently. We had a truly great experience. So I'm going to just kick off by asking the guys to do a quick intro of themselves, a little tweet pitch of what they're doing. I'll kick off myself. So my name is Rena Maycock. I'm the CEO and founder of Kilter. We're developing child protection software for smartphones that detects and blocks cyberbullying, grooming, and suicide and self-harm. We're early stage, and we're raising our first seed round at the moment. So Leonie, you hit.
Hi, I'm Leonie Lynch, and I'm the founder of a functional food company based in Ireland called Juspy. Made up name, but it means just be unapologetically in the moment of today. And what we do is we sell, at the moment, I sell like collagen powder, and we're developing a range of unique supplements for the busy, tired person like everybody on this call.
Fantastic. Thanks a million, Leonie. Fiona.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Sorry, I'm actually in DC, so I'm saying good morning. It's early here. HaloSOS delivers safety as a service solution to the top tiered hotels globally. And we help those hotels who want to lead with exemplary staff safety to deliver a solution that provides the tools to manage that safety. And we focus on delivering overwhelming value. We're also at a fundraising stage at the moment, and working on signing new customers here in the US at the moment.
Hannah.
I'm Hannah. I'm from NLF, and we are a pre-launch coffee startup.
Fantastic. Thanks, everybody. So in the context of this conversation, I looked up the definition of culture, and culture is defined as a set of shared values, goals, attitudes, practices that characterize an organization. So, you know, I was thinking about the context of today, and you know, it's a female entrepreneur panel, so it'd probably be remiss of me not to mention that, you know, studies when it comes to culture, you know, on female-led companies on the Fortune 1000 and Credit Suisse, they find generally that not only do women-led companies generate 3 times the returns, I couldn't resist the opportunity to put that in there, but we also foster a more enjoyable work culture, more positive work culture. And that's, you know, that's reflected in studies where both men and women feel that they've got fairer opportunities, you know, to be promoted. They feel they've got better access to equal pay, childcare, and qualities like, you know, compassion and empathy are really valued. But actually, I think that might be changing, and I think for the better. You know, we were on this call, our preparation call there last night, and Pete was talking about the 4 kids going bonkers in the background, and Leonie was poolside with her kids. And I thought, you know, isn't it great that COVID has brought this one good thing to our lives, in that it's brought this real life into company culture on a macro level, where everybody's okay about talking about their families. It doesn't need to be a dirty secret that you've got a life outside of that, whether you're looking after kids or elderly parents, that kind of thing. So I think that's a really good company or a culture shift that's manifested across all organizations. But ultimately, I think we all strive really to create and experience a unique culture in our work life and life, you know, particularly in work for our employees and for ourselves. Something that really bonds us to the identity of the company and makes us feel a part of a bigger good thing. You know, my first experience of that uniqueness was about 20 years ago when I started my career in 98 FM. And it was never a formal thing. Culture was never really discussed. It was a passive thing. It was just there. It was there through actions. And that culture was work hard, play hard. And it was an inward expression of the outward goal of the company. And that was to generate revenues and grow listeners. And that was done through partying and fun. So organically, listeners would come along with us for the ride, and you know, advertisers just wanted to be there along with us as well. You know, so it wasn't ever formal. You know, the closest thing we came to formality was when we were going through a brand change, and an advertising agency came in to do a whiteboarding session with all of the staff, and we were all encouraged to just shout adjectives at the whiteboard, which was great. But you know, that was as close as it came. It was a very, very organic thing, the company culture. So Leonie, I'll ask you, how would you describe your culture and its uniqueness?
Uniqueness, I'm not sure that it's unique because I've been inspired by other people. So I would definitely take inspiration from, I studied Orla Kiley as a brand for 6 years as part of my doctorate. And one of the things that she did throughout her whole culture, it was a visual culture. So I studied fine art in college. So visual culture is ingrained in me. It's just natural in me. And when I saw it in play in business with Orla Kiley, every consumer touch point was thought about. She's design led, obviously, but it was more culture based than just, you know, she's a fashion designer. It was that when I was in her office, every folder on the shelf had a color. And I asked her why, you know, and she went, well, there's no excuse for folders not to have a visual impact on my staff. Or, you know, when I was looking at her brand on social media, and the way people talked about the effect of color on their feeling or on their emotional state in that particular day. So they'd see the Orla Kylie bus drive around and they'd say, oh my God, that makes me feel so good on a dreary day. So that always stuck with me outside of myself, because it was natural to me. But when you look at how you deal with consumers, they're embedded in visual culture. So why isn't that like a central part of your culture as a brand? So then as part of that bigger picture, I study brand culture, and that is co-creative, right? So the definition of brand culture is that it's co-creative. So you have to bring the customer into the creation of what you're doing. So that's all this kind of things. The visual culture and the brand culture being co-created is my culture, or what I'm trying to set.
Yeah, I never really thought about visual culture before, but it's a really good example of how you marry the customer experience with the employee experience and the internal culture. Fiona, what's your experience of that uniqueness?
Absolutely. So HaloSOS is a safety business, and it's really important that, you know, from day one, when I was building the values of the business, that we communicated and brought the whole team in as we were creating those values and creating the culture of the business. So we asked all of the questions of our team that we wanted to reflect back out into the business. So for us, starting with those really strong foundations and building on them and growing them was really, really important, and develop a culture that felt safe internally as well. So communicating, listening, feeling free to be able to speak, and develop that as the company grew. And notwithstanding, when you start a business and you have a new team, particularly starting in a pandemic, which is where we started, where we weren't together, weren't in the same room, it was really important that we connected, that we connected the team together, so that the values that we wanted to develop, the business that we wanted to work in, that we wanted not only to work in, but those values to be reflected back into our customers and within our team, that we had to work that little bit extra hard to communicate those values and to communicate the culture by connecting the team. So we'd very often meet outside and, you know, have a brown bag lunch and walk and talk as we developed the culture within the team. So listening to the team and understanding where it is they want to go as well as individuals, to reflect that back into our customers. Also, another point for us is we did look at our customers. We looked at their values, we looked at their culture, we looked at what they wanted to do in the world. We looked at how they wanted to attract clients to their businesses, and then how they reflect their culture back into their staff. So we kind of married the two of those, and obviously we're developing, we're heading in the right direction because we're getting all the signals back as well. So bringing all those together, and having those come out into where it is you want to go as a business was really, really important for us to do from a very early stage.
Yeah, it's a really excellent example of your product being mirrored in your company culture internally, which is phenomenal. Well done. Hannah.
Yeah, I guess I'd kind of describe our culture at the moment as rapidly evolving. So we're so new that it's kind of taking shape every single day. But is it unique in the sense that it's kind of radically different? Probably on paper, or if I was to talk about it now, probably not yet. I guess, you know, and you mentioned it there, everybody kind of says their culture is unique, and then you read these culture statements or manifestos and they all kind of sound the same. You know, anybody can kind of look at a list of values and pick some nice sounding words, but I think for me, where the uniqueness lies is really how those values and that culture are brought to life in the everyday, and how it shapes your interactions and decisions, and probably, you know, especially those decisions that you make when no one else is looking. So that's where we're at the moment. It's making those really early decisions and about being mindful that this is where culture starts. So what I find really valuable when we're, you know, trying to create a culture like us, or to evaluate an existing culture is to ask yourself things like, not just what is our culture, but instead, like, what does it feel like to be a part of this culture? Or, how does our culture shape our decision making? Or, where we're making big decisions, it feels like almost every single day, it's about checking in to see, okay, what does this decision say about the culture that we want to create? So I think that's where the uniqueness of a culture is really found, not necessarily the descriptor, but how you bring it to life. So that's something that, at this early stage that we're just working on every single day.
Well, look, I think that's absolutely key, and it's a really good example of the fact that you're using your culture first and foremost as your checklist against which you measure all your decision making, which is, that means that you're going to build a very, very successful company that's very, very true to your culture. So I guess throughout my career, culture has been, I mentioned, a really, a passive thing. It wasn't really labeled culture. It was driven by kind of a need and every endeavor in the business. For instance, if I look back at my experience in iRadio, we were a startup. We had 64 staff, and we didn't have big marketing budgets, and we needed to cut through fast because, there was an awful lot of noise in the market, a lot of radio stations vying for ears. And, we could play slightly better songs than everybody else, but ultimately we were thinking, how do we get this, really good traction? So we developed very quickly this culture of wackiness. We decided that we'd get that traction through crazy ideas, and when it came to communication, we would have these regular all staff, creative sit downs where, no idea was a bad idea. No idea was impossible. Everything was possible. And, then we'd have regular town hall meetings where we created this them and us culture, in that the them were the people on the outside that were boring and conventional, and the us on the inside that were exciting, innovative, creative, and we were going to turn radio upside down. But I suppose, and that was an organic process, and it was driven by the need of the company, and it just became the company culture. But I suppose COVID really has made that kind of organic absorption of culture very, very tricky. It's a really difficult task, the communication of culture. It used to be done by big tech, for instance, used to communicate culture through props. They would decide, okay, we want to convey fun. How do we do that? We'll have bean bags, and we'll have foosball tables, and we'll have a jar of lollipops at the reception desk. But those props are all gone now because everybody's working from home. So with everyone working from home, communicating that culture has been, has had to become really formal. So HR people have KPIs around this, and so do team managers. How are you onboarding new staff when they can't come in here and experience this company culture in the environment? How are you conveying this company culture to people that are working from home and have never been in this company culture? So Fiona, can I go to you and ask you how you already communicate, or how you plan to communicate your company culture in this particular climate?
Yeah, that it is definitely challenging, particularly in an early stage with new people. We've done a couple of things. I've actually gone to teach yoga classes in the morning with the team. Back in the day, I was a yoga teacher, so I've done that. We have fantastic Feel Good Fridays. Every Friday we have a team meeting where we don't necessarily talk about work. In fact, what I try to prevent is the work discussion. I'm trying to get in touch with people as people. What are you doing? What's the latest book you're reading? What are you planning for the weekend? How are you feeling? I mean, and I do ask that question a lot. How are things going for you? Do you need any help? I think we can become very robotic, as somebody said earlier on, in our approach with the Zoom call. You're missing that human to human interaction, the softness that goes with that, the spontaneity that goes with that. It's you're very stuck to your position. You can't move away from the screen too easily, and it's more difficult to read body language. So we've tried to fun it up as well. It's really important to me that I build a business that I want to work in and that I enjoy working in, and I want the team to have the same input. Other things we do just to get engagement and to break the day up is we might have a fun game that we might do for 15 minutes on a Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock. A squiggle game or something online where all we do is laugh, and it just breaks the ice. So things like that are really, really important to me. And again, going back to when we were in that original really hard lockdown, where there was absolutely ability to meet indoors, we would go outdoors. And wherever we can, we do something outside. So things like that are really, really important. Going into the future, it's always been my philosophy to be remote working. I've remote worked for 20 years. In one of the big corporates I worked in years ago, I think I was one of the first people just to insist, I have to work from home. I don't want to be in the car for 3 hours a day. This isn't a work-life balance. So I will always have that working from home blend in there. Notwithstanding, I do believe it's really important that we meet very regularly as a team, but it doesn't have to be the 9 to 5. So there's those few things we're implementing and continuously trying to find more creative ways of doing it as we grow.
So mainly through activities. I mean, you had 20 years
I'm very active.
Of experience and training, gearing up for this, communicating your company culture through distance, which is fantastic. Leonie.
So I'm small. I am my team. So when I talk about building culture and you're all talking about your teams, it's difficult for me, or it's different for me because my team are my customers mostly. And I have 2 interns working with me from the States. So again, thank you for the remote working that I get the opportunity to work with 2 of them in the States. And for me, again, it's looking at them not as employees or as co-workers, they're human. So what are you doing? So my intern last weekend, he had his first weightlifting competition. So the first point of or question that I asked him was, how did the competition go? I'm sending you some product to boost you up for your competition, stuff like that. So treating both people that you work with and your customers as human, really getting that empathy going. And it's okay to say, I've messed up, I'm sorry, bringing it back down to stepping in their shoes, and if they're miserable today, or if they're in bad form, or if you're in bad form, own up and say why, or try and find out why it can be fixed. But for me, again, there's a thing called the brand culture toolkit. So you have to look inside the organization, outside the organization. Again, it's co-created. So you have to think local, but you also have to think global. So there's all these paradoxes going on, but they all you have to be flexible enough to work them all of the time. And for me, it's about engagement. So when you're trying to build a brand culture, the only way you can get buy-in and get people to bring your brand as part of their identity in their lives and be your advocates is if they engage and believe it. So for me, it was something like, I'll just give you one example. Again, it came out organically like yours did. I DJ'd in my 20s, so music as part of like arts and culture was part of my life. And I wanted it to be part of the brand because I know how important music is to people. So we started this thing called Juspy in the Mix. We on number 56, every Friday we release a Spotify playlist. I was talking to a wholesale guy the other day, and he sent me an email, and he was, we were drawing up a contract or whatever, and he said, I'm sitting here listening to Juspy in the Mix number 33 while I'm doing this. So again, it's connection, it's engagement, but it's just, again, our tagline for that is we're the background to your foreground. So it's brands, companies become so ingrained and so much a part of people's lives that you have to acknowledge it once, or first off, and then see how you can do it authentically to, actually engage. And we did a playlist with a pub I used to work in back in the middle, like I think it was Easter or the June Bank Holiday weekend actually, and the lockdown was really, really at the highest level. People were miserable. I asked this guy who owned the pub, because it's a famous pub for its music, to do a playlist. It got 50,000 views on LinkedIn.
Wow.
And it was the highest engaged that week on LinkedIn as one of their posts. So it just goes to show that if you can think outside the box about culture and, from an actual culture point of view, you can connect with people on a human level. And that's, I think, what it's about.
What a smart thing to do, communicating your culture through music. And everybody has this deep connection with music. And, you mentioned that you're picking up the phone to people, to your customers, to convey that empathetic side to your culture, which is literally the definition of communication. You're literally having a conversation with somebody to convey your culture, which is extremely smart. And whether you may not be aware of this, but in your background, you're also communicating your culture, because I'm not like the others. And I love your flip chart there with all the color on it. Phenomenal. Hannah.
Yeah, like all our culture is internal at the moment. So I guess for our culture, it's not to talk about it, but to live it. And we just try to do that kind of honestly, fast and openly. I'm like a really firm believer in the quicker you can be like absolutely 100% honest, the faster and better things get done. And that probably starts with being honest with yourself first, which is probably the hardest thing to do. And it's funny, when we were talking about our culture, one thing that like really sticks out for me always is when we were kids at nighttime, if mum felt we were worried about something, she'd physically check under our pillows for the worries, and then she'd pretend to have found them, pick them up and throw them out the window. And it happened really organically, but that's something that we really try to emulate, is that sense of just not letting things fester. So what really works for us is if we're closing out, discussions or meetings or even just the day, by tapping into that and kind of sense checking, like, are there any niggles here? If we didn't do this, what else would we do? Or what are we missing? Or, that sense of the pre-mortem instead of the post-mortem. It's, asking, if this was to fail, why would that be? And what can we do about it now to prevent that happening? So I think cultivating that culture, particularly in the early stages of curiosity, and then creating that space where there's kind of fluid communications and people can kind of ask those questions, it just kind of creates healthy and open communications that I think it seems to be saving us an awful lot of time. So that's how we're trying to do it.
Yeah, so basically nothing is too small, no matter what it is, air it. We'll deal with it, so nothing is unresolved, and that's a really fantastic way to be. So, when it comes to developing culture in a startup, it's particularly difficult because, if and in this climate as well, this remote climate, if we take my example, for instance, we've got Kilter. We're pre-seed, so we're all working unpaid, in some cases around full-time jobs. We're all working remotely. We don't have we do have a premises, but we're not going into it yet. So that feeling of all of us being in a bunker that you'd usually get with a startup, where everybody kind of knuckles down, you're a really solid team and you're focused on this one goal of getting that product to market, and you're all in the same journey together. It's very, very difficult to achieve that and to have that sense of culture in startups. So I suppose, Hannah, I'll come back to you if you don't mind. Have you found it hard to develop your company culture, or have you found it a bit of a breeze because you're both in the business together, you kind of know each other so well? Has it been a deliberate thing, or has it been quite hard to kind of focus on that culture?
It has been hard. I think, it has. I guess it's easy to think about your culture and talk about it and, say kind of, the words and descriptors, and then you're making decisions like, this product or that, and, this one maybe has better sustainability credentials, which is something that's really important to it, but then your margin is gone and, oh my gosh, maybe we actually don't have a business. So it is really difficult to live by it. To make decisions that are aligned with it. And I imagine it's harder to kind of to maintain that consistently, but I guess nothing's probably harder than the alternative of if you don't kind of consciously cultivate that culture, and I guess see yourself as the custodian of culture from the very beginning, because I think something we're kind of keenly aware of is, the absence of a culture from day one creates by default a negative culture. So it's hard, and sometimes you feel kind of silly, the two of us sitting at the table talking about, our culture, but I guess it's just putting down those roots and kind of holding ourselves to account that if the ambition is there to grow, that starts with us today. It can be really hard.
Okay, so you hit the nail on the head, and an awful lot of business owners will face this same issue where they are faced with their company culture that they've decided that they want to live by, but when it comes down to the practicalities of implementing the business and having a profitable company, you need to decide how important is that culture. Is it rigid? Is it movable? Can you evolve it? Can you sacrifice the integrity of some of those cultural decisions that you've decided to live by, those pillars you've decided to live by, in order to make your business work? And if so, to what degree? How much profit are you prepared to make in order to sacrifice certain cultural decisions that you've You've decided
Yeah, but then the benefit of that is when you have a better culture, then you have a better business. So it's give and take a little bit. But yeah, it's that's what we're kind of keenly aware of and working on at the moment.
And you know, the true test of that is going to be when you take investors in, whether they buy into your culture as much as they do profits.
Yeah.
Hopefully they will. Fiona, have you found it difficult to develop your company culture?
Well, first of all, it's never too early to start. You must start at the beginning. There's no point in coming in, late into the day, a year or two later, and saying, "No, what's our culture?" So you have to start from the beginning. And there's always a period of time internally where you've got new people coming on board, the team is growing, or you're beginning to recruit people, and you want to make sure that's a good cultural fit. So you want to really know where it is you're going to ensure that you're hiring the right people. And then if people believe in your values and your culture and where the business is going, you'll succeed. So in terms of where you might want to go, you have to be patient as well. And you do have to test the water and listen for feedback. I think it's really, really important. I haven't necessarily found it difficult, but you do have to be persistent. If you do notice that you might be, heading off in a direction that doesn't align with your culture or the values that you want to develop and create that culture into, you have to draw it back. So you're steering the ship, so to speak. There are many people on board with you, and we're all heading in a direction. So you want to know that you're going in the right direction. But if the wind for any reason drops, you want to know that you can steer the ship in the right direction, really. So not necessarily difficult, but you do have to keep on top of it. You do have to be listening, communicating, and connecting with the people where it's really, really important to drive that. Yeah.
So using your cultural values as your guiding principle, your North Star, if you like, when you're steering the ship, that's the direction you go in, and you always refer back to those cultural values and principles. So Leonie.
For me, this whole journey is so hard. If I'm doing it my way. And and that goes down to, again, the Ralph Steadman on the wall, and that's why it's up there. It's to basically say, when I'm doing decisions, I have amazing advisors, I listen to them, but at the end of the day, if I don't do the culture or don't put something out the way it should be in my head, then it's not authentic. It's not why I'm here. It's not why I've gone 5 years unpaid. It's not why I'm doing this. So I'm doing this to create a food brand that actually is embedded in arts and culture and and design and blah blah blah. So for me, it's that. And the second thing is, everyone's not going to like you. Everyone's not your customer, and you shouldn't waste your energy trying to convince those people that aren't your customer that they're your customer. So I have this customer service game going on at the moment, that if someone challenges me in an email or on a review or something, it's my challenge to turn them, so I will turn them, right? So I'm about 99% successful, because at the end of the day, all they want to do, they want to be heard. They've given you money, they want to be heard, or, what's going on. So 9 times out of 10, I've turned them, where 2 days later, I've gotten a 5-star review because I've listened to them. But also, if they don't turn, they are not my customer, So I think those two things, like, I'm doing it my way or the highway. And then if people want to work with me, or people want to list my product, they buy into my culture. They sit down and listen to the playlist, they buy into it. So again, it's that co-creation of brand culture. If you're not my customer, you're not my customer. If you don't want to work with me, you don't have to. This is my journey. Come into Juspy land or don't. That's
Well, it sounds to me like you found it very easy to develop your company culture, because it is your own personal values, and you're deciding to just, be unmerciful about sticking to them. And that's a great thing. I'm intrigued to know, when you were turning your negative comments, was it through love and kindness and killing them with adoration, or was it, factual and?
A little bit. So, my mom always said, you be, when you're nice and you listen, it's a softer sell. So first of all, I would say, I hear you, I get your frustration, let me explain. Or, for example, you know, I would have no problem saying, look, it is me in the business. I am a startup. I messed up. Like, for example, I'll give you an example. I had to send a sample, which is free, to a woman last Friday. I ran to the post office. Post office going to close 2 minutes to 5. I left her address in the car, right? Couldn't send the sample. So I sent it Monday. I got an email yesterday saying she hadn't got it. She was really disappointed, etc. And I said to her, actually, hands up, I had to take my 14-year-old dog to the vet because we thought we were going to have to put him down, right? Kids, wherever, everything went, you know, whatever. My husband would kill me because, you know, you're telling too much. There's no need for that much information for a customer. He came back, I'm so sorry, how's your dog? You know, there was a, you know, human connection, don't worry about it. Then she emailed me back later on. She, the package was in the post when she went home. She tried it, she loved it, she ordered 3 packs last night.
Perfect example of company culture reflecting in a customer for life, I have no doubt. So, but when it comes to the evolution of company culture, I mean, in my experience, you know, when we started our matchmaking company 10 years ago, we started off really wanting to help people, and we had this fluffy view that we were going to be able to create this business where it was all full of empathy and kindness, and we wanted to make people's dreams come true by providing them with their perfect match. But we realized quite quickly the type of, like, 99% of our customers were lovely, but that 1% of customer was very aggressive and rage filled. And, you know, they were making it very, very difficult for the company to survive. We couldn't keep staff because they kept getting abused. So we needed to modify our company culture very, very quickly. And we made this conscious effort to evolve into behaving more like a business and less like a counseling service. We became results driven. It was all about getting success for our customers. And we would give them a very rules-based approach. And that reflected with our staff then, and at the internal company culture, they felt backed up. They felt that, you know, we wouldn't stand for them being abused by anybody. It was very rules-based, and that has really stood to us. So that's, you know, that was our example in intro. And then, but we also know with Kilter, you know, we're only getting started. And in our first year developing our product, it's going to be, you know, shoulder to the wheel, everybody on the same team with a, you know, a race to getting this really amazing product to market. But when we get to market, our team are going to be dealing with the very worst things that society has to offer: cyberbullying, grooming, suicide, and self-harm content. So it's going to need to evolve into a much more self-care type of environment where it's all about empathy, work-life balance, protecting the world's children from harm, but also not forgetting the children that are at home waiting on us to come home and ask them about their day at school. So we know that evolution is coming and we're preparing for it. So, you know, with that in mind, Hannah, you know, how do you see, you know, your company culture evolving as you grow your business?
I guess, yeah, that's it. Just like openly, I think Pete, just like the very first sentence was kind of describing culture as the way we do things around here. And what's really, really important for me is that never turns into, because that's the way we have always done things around here. So I think you can define your culture, but it's not definitive. So like it's, you know, a living, breathing thing, like, you know, a pet or a plant or a person. It needs light to be shone on it. It needs to be nourished, and it absolutely needs that space to grow. So my only hope, I guess, for our culture is that as we grow, as, you know, as people and as a business, that our culture has that space and is open-ended enough to evolve and grow too.
So not too rigid, basically, is what you're saying. You'll learn, yeah, exactly, fantastic. And Fiona?
Yeah, it's really important. If I look back on my past and the different environments that I've worked in, I've been very lucky to work in some really great companies, great big companies, great small companies. I've taken the best from all of those businesses when I reflect back on, particularly some small businesses that I worked on, because you have that really close touch point with the people in your team, and you have a very close touch point with your customer. So everybody is involved in everything at that point in time. And that's often where the most happens, where people are given the confidence to step up and be vulnerable to what I say, break, create and collaborate. I encourage everybody not to be afraid of, you know, making mistakes. Don't set out to make them, but, you know, don't be afraid to do it. And when we break something, it gives us the opportunity to fix something. So all of those things are really important, that we have confidence as a team growing, and then that confidence is reflected back out into the market, so that they see a team that are happy, love what they're doing, most importantly, but also because we're providing such a valuable service. And at the end of the day, we are keeping people safe. That everything we do is focused on that one point, safety.
Brilliant. And so learning from mistakes and letting that be reflected in your company culture. So Leonie, we'll give you the final word now before Brian comes in.
It's rare I get the final word. So there's a mantra I live by, which is here to learn, compelled to think, obliged to share. So learning, it would be hopefully going forward when I have my team and we're surrounded by beautiful looking objects and things and we're listening to cool tunes, but there's always an aspect of learning. So I want to be able to teach what I know to somebody else. I want them to teach something to me. I want, to teach consumers about good health, about, movement and, everything. So that aspect of the sum of all parts of your culture coming together for a positive impact.
Brilliant. So basically collaboration between you, your customers, and all those different learnings informing the constant evolution of your company culture. So I hope everybody has picked up some useful insights today, and I'll hand back over to Pete.